Liz Clute needs to be pulled over.
Oh, here we are. I'm on now. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Josh Hinman needs to be pulled over.
It looked like Commissioner Garrido was on the phone, so might be a delay there.
Okay. We're just waiting for Commissioner Garrido and Commissioner Wolf.
I'm turning off my video so I don't have bandwidth problems.
Okay. We all know how that goes.
It's day by day, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And someone was saying that it's, or I guess it was Steve, you were talking about sort of this noontime bandwidth issue that he has at home with CenturyLink. But there are definitely seems to be like certain times of the day when I can't do both video and audio and then catch everybody else.
They must be streaming shows at lunchtime.
Yeah, Rob, it was so bad earlier today. I went off 2 or 3 times. You probably noticed, but anyway.
Yeah. Wow. All the more reason to get work with KPUD. It's only a mile away or whatever.
I called him yesterday.
Hey, Amber, will you rename Commissioner Wolf? I'm not sure what's going on there.
I will. Where is
There
he?
he is.
I don't see him.
He's here.
He's on, my screen says his name is Matt.
Oh, he's Matt
Oh.
Pickering.
Oh, there we
rename
go.
him.
Yep. Okay. Got it.
Done a face swap.
No problem here. Matt's much better looking than I am.
Okay.
Thanks.
I think we've got it. Oh, we're missing somebody. Who are we missing? We usually have 14.
Commissioner Garrido is trying to get off the phone now.
Okay.
Maybe while we're waiting, commissioners, I'm getting a decent amount of requests to get access to the recordings. Maybe if I could work with IS, one of the citizens that asked me for it actually recommended maybe we try YouTube, and I think IS has done that before with a couple of other things. Maybe we could leverage that and just link it to our budget website.
Chris, you can talked to Doug Bear. I believe he's done it.
Right on.
We do have a YouTube channel, so that probably would be the easiest one with a large video file.
Okay.
Well, in the interest of time, should we proceed, or is Commissioner Garrido wrapped up?
I will go check again. Give me just 1 second.
What are we waiting for?
Charlotte. But if she's not off the phone when Alex gets back, then I think we just need to keep going.
I agree with you.
There she is.
Okay.
My apologies.
Okay, Liz.
Should I just start?
Sure.
Yes, my apologies for being late. I got on a call and I couldn't get off.
It's okay. Well, good afternoon. I appreciate you giving me the time to be able to present our budget. Looking at for the Department of Emergency Management, which also, as you're probably aware, is responsible for running the Emergency Operations Center and the Joint Emergency Management Program for the cities and the county, as well as leading Region 2 Homeland Security, which is made up of Kitsap, Clallam, and Jefferson County. So as far as the staffing goes this year, there is no increase. We're staying at status quo. 5 personnel and 0.15 to support us with finances and budgeting. Chris, you want to move? There we go. Okay. So we do have an increase over last year as far as the overall budget, but the majority of that is offset by the fact that we're going to be spending down both the 2019 and the 2020 grant in 2020. And the reason for that was specifically to help offset any increases in costs to the partners, including Kitsap County. So we do, on the right-hand side, what you see are, in the first box is the increase due to benefits, standby pay, and step increases. We have not had any attrition in the last year. And then moving down to supplies, services, miscellaneous, and those expenses, the increases that you see are due to grant-funded initiatives. We have about $30,000 in supplies for a portable repeater system to allow the capability to stand up our ham radio network for communications in case of an earthquake or other wildfire or related major emergency, and provide computer software maintenance, and that's for the warning system that we use for public notification to the communities. Under services, again, these costs are all grant covered through the Department of Homeland Security and the state of Washington. The Family Assistance Center plan is a plan that is put together to help with reunification of families in the event of an active shooter situation, or again, a wildfire that requires major evacuations, landslides, so that we can hook people back up with their family and provide services as a one-stop shop location. The Put a Big Foot Forward campaign is our our Bigfoot risk reduction initiative, which started with the mitigation plan update and is rolling forward with the pathway to recovery for the COVID incident. We have an AmeriCorps person that we've brought on board to help with school outreach virtually initially, and then if we get back to in-person schooling, actually to go into the schools and help us share that information out. We also we have a number of trailers that we're using for response to the COVID response, and we have more trailers than we have vehicles. And our newest vehicle is a 2012. Our oldest is a 98. So again, through grant funding, we'll be purchasing an additional tow vehicle. You'll see in the next 3 boxes the national priority projects. Those are projects that we're required to take a percentage of our grant funding and allocate it towards 3 projects by FEMA. One of those, the Soft Target project, is working with the faith-based communities on how they can reduce their risk from someone actually coming in and performing an active shooter type scenario within their organization. Under miscellaneous expenses, there's a large chunk that we take out of our grants. Minimum of 20% of our grants get allocated to the sheriff's office to help them with increasing their resources, their education, and their needs to offset terrorism-based incidents. And then the National Priority Project there is working with, again, with law enforcement and the IT department to mitigate impacts from cybersecurity threats. And then the interfund payments are the payments that we pay to IT. We've actually had a reduction there in the number of pieces of equipment that we have that have interfund costs associated to them. So we have a little bit of savings in that area. So looking at the bottom line, again, we do have an increase this year of $264,000, but we have offset the overall budget by about $540,000 with grants. So the ask to Kitsap County, the increase there is a little over $26,000. The increases to the partners in the other cities is about $12,000. Do I have any questions?
I have a question, Liz. Thank you very much for what you're doing in the EOC and the organizations under DEM. Can you talk briefly and just explain what is the notification to the community? What is that? What is that? And I can't read, it's too small. Was there a cost involved with that?
So it's a pretty nominal cost. So that is the Community Warning System program, which the program is made up of policies, procedures, and protocols on what information and actions we're going to tell the public to take, depending on the type of emergency and how exigent or how critical and time-wise the emergency is impacting us. So we have an annual maintenance fee that we pay every year to have the technology that calls phone numbers to people in their home, and also allows us to activate the what's called the CMAS, which is the cell broadcast capability through FEMA to do notification out to cell phones all at once to say shelter in place, evacuate now, in a wildfire, ready, set, go. This is the communication technology that we use to get that information out to the public. It also goes to emails and to text and out to Nextdoor, which we use as a social media platform, and then also to Facebook and to Twitter to get information out in multiple ways to the public on what is the action we need you to take in what specific area of the county in order to save lives and reduce impacts to the public, the community, and the environment.
Great, thank you. I was thinking more of we're at the beach and you hear the tsunami siren go off, but that's certainly not what you were talking about. You're talking about communication with cell phones and other means.
Well, it would include sirens if we had sirens, but we don't have sirens, and the state hasn't identified as Kitsap County currently as a location to implement sirens, but that would be a part of the warning system if we were to have sirens.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So a quick question. In the bottom of that sheet, it shows the Kitsap portion. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
In the red.
I'll defer to Amy.
I am available to answer questions. If you'd like, I could share my screen and show the breakdown based on ownership across the jurisdictions.
That'd be great.
While she's bringing that up, do you have any questions about what we're doing in the EOC or the services that we're providing?
I don't have a question, but definitely kudos. I think that, this has been such an interesting past 6 months or so when I think we've so focused on natural disasters of some type or another, and then to have COVID and the pandemic experience and it being a very different animal to respond to, right? In terms of its duration, sort of this fluidity that it has. And I think that the DEM staff and the EOC and the Joint Command have done a stellar job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's what we call a slow roll emergency. Something similar that you have when you have the dust storms off of the Sahara or a drought that can impact crops and food security. But what it's done is given us a tremendous opportunity to capacity build. A lot of people at the county and the special districts and in the cities, as well as in the tribes, with how emergency operation works, so that when we do have a Cascadia type level of event or a wildfire, people are going to get it, and they're going to understand the terminology, and they're going to understand their roles and be able to do a great comprehensive response.
Right.
So Amy, were you going to talk a little bit about the
Sure.
allocation?
So I was privileged to work with Liz this year on putting her 2021 budget together, and we were able to come up with some new tools to kind of fine tune her efforts. And so we were able to separate her grant efforts apart from her standard baseline operations. So at a high level, this is how her operating budget breaks down. Of course, it is driven entirely by ownership percentage, and these are the most recent available projections for population by location. For purposes of the initial allocation, the city of Bainbridge Island is not calculated because Liz has been able to procure a flat rate contribution from them separately. But for those that are still part of her funding allocation, this is how it compared year over year, and the way that it broke down. Obviously, Kitsap County has almost 3/4 of the ownership share. As she mentioned, the amount that other jurisdictions will be providing is $12,008. And this, from a purely operational standpoint, this is the year-over-year delta with her operating budget.
Thank you.
Commissioner Geller, do you have any further questions about that?
No, thanks. I appreciate it. I just wanted to see kind of what the differential was. And my assumption, again, is even with Bainbridge kind of being out of that mix, it's apportioned by population and jurisdictional size and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's great that we're still able to get that contribution from them to help pick up these costs. Right now it is programmed to remain flat, but yeah, it's notable that she's been able to, and it's a testament to a lot of the federal funding we've received, that she's able to do the work that she is without having to come in and ask for a substantial amount of additional funding.
So Amy, would you confirm, not that I don't trust Liz, I think I may not have heard this correctly, just confirm that in this budget, DEM is 260 some thousand, 64,000 over, but there are 540,000 in grants pending, so therefore puts DCD over at 26,000?
Right. So of her entire budget, that 500,000-ish figure is what will be offset by grant revenue. If for whatever reason, due to workload or what have you, we're not able to see some of those grant expenditures through, that money will not be spent. That will be carried forward into future years. And then, so from a purely operational standpoint, this is how much her budget is going up. And so the county's portion of that is the $26,500.
Okay. So thank you. If there are no grants, that's what I thought I heard. If there are no grants, where are we standing on the county portion?
It would be that exact same 26,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, so back on the other sheet where there was the line item for the sheriff's office, that's already, so it's kind of here as an expense. Is it already recognized in the sheriff's budget that we went over earlier, or?
Really great. This was an add to their grant on the emergency management side, Amy, but I imagine that what would happen would KCSO would go and procure whatever goods. I think this is how Liz has explained it to me in the past, and then it would be an interfund back to emergency management. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah, she has the access to the funding.
I think to answer your question, Commissioner Gelder, you wouldn't see it on the sheriff's side.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. It's
Although
the
it
benefit of the sheriff's office, but the money and all the transactions stay within DEM.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would also point out it's important to keep optics on that because obviously with everything we all have on our plate, it's hard to see some of these projects through, but it is important that we remember that money is there, it is available to help them, and we need to make sure that we're able to get that money spent while we can.
I guess my question would be, is there potentially some duplication if they have a need in the sheriff's office that could be fulfilled there, and they're, that was one of the cuts or one of the other things, how that might be able to play off of each other?
Correct me if I'm wrong. There's no guarantee or promise that the grant will continue beyond 2020, right? That's probably a question for Liz.
Well, so the 2019 grant expires in 2021. The 2020 grant expires in 2022. So again, so we will have grant funding that is allocated to the sheriff's office that will disappear the 30th of August if they don't spend it. But the other funding that's actually from the 2020 grant, if they don't spend it, can carry forward. We're just trying to encourage them to get to a single year so that we can start managing the grants in the year that we receive them. And it's also helping us offset any impacts from this COVID pandemic on our programs by allowing us to have additional funding to spend down.
Liz, is the magnitude of funding available as large as it is this go around because we were more focused on COVID activities and therefore the grants just not been spent down? So fast forward 2 or 3 more years, the magnitude may not be the same, correct?
Well, the magnitude is always currently, knock on wood, going down. Hopefully it'll start going up again, but the trend with FEMA is that both the EMPG, which is the Emergency Management Program grant that helps pay for up to 50% of different positions and salary, and the Homeland Security grants have been trending down. So you are seeing a larger number here this year because we've merged the 2019 and the 2020 grants. So the 2021 grant is, we don't know what that number is going to be, but it has been trending downwards. But we never know when the federal government's going to just cut off the Homeland Security grants. We also had a benefit this year. You might recall that we got an EMPG supplement grant, I think around 46,000, that we carried forward into next year to help offset staff costs, because we didn't need to utilize it this year in 2020.
Other thoughts?
Just, I only had one parting comment, and that is, do we get any kind of revenues for product placement with the Cougar stuff in Chris's screen?
I don't know. They got some serious budget cuts of their own. They don't have a lush faculty of alumni that's padding their coffers at the moment.
Okay.
Good question. Liz, thank you for the work that you and your crew do. It's fabulous.
You're very welcome. That's what we're here for, and we're glad to be of service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the auditor up next, and I am in the process of moving folks over.
Thank you.
The auditor himself should be moved over. Yes, Paul? With us?
Yes, I am. Sorry. My screen's
Welcome.
just bounced when you brought me over. So
Right, that happens. So I've moved Daryl over. Do you want David and Shannon as well?
yes, please.
Okie dokie.
All right. Sorry, I had you all set on my screen that I could look forward at, and now everything's bounced over to my right. And Teams doesn't seem, or Zoom doesn't seem to play well with me on this.
Well, we don't change much during the presentation.
No. So thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having us today. I'm Paul Andrews. I'm your county auditor, and it's an honor to be here with me today. Like Amber had mentioned, I've got Shannon Korn, who's our finance manager, and I've got David Frisk, the elections manager, and Daryl Dowgs, my chief deputy. We're going to give you a brief overview first of the office. Do we have public and other visitors, or is this just county at this point?
It looks like we might have a few members of the public as well as a couple of county staff. I'm not familiar with some of the names, but.
Okay. Well, I will give a brief overview then of the auditor's office for those that aren't aware. We're comprised of 4 unique divisions. We've got our recording division, our licensing division, financial, and elections. We have a total of 28 employees. 19 of those come out of the general fund. 8.5 of those in elections, and we have half of an FTE out of our document preservation fund. The recording department, we're responsible for the permanent preservation of public records. That would be marriage certificates, deeds, mortgages, liens, surveys, plats, and your veteran records. We record over 64,000 documents a year. And this year we are at about 79% of those being electronic recordings. We have historical records that date back to 1987 that have been digitized and they're available online, and we're adding more to that every year. And currently we are ahead of our budgeted revenue for the year in recording. Licensing, we manage title transfers and renewal of vehicles, vessels, and motorcycles. And we also see the operations of the 5 licensing subagents that are around the county. And last year we handled about 350,000 transactions in Kitsap County. And this year we're projecting to handle 430,000. Our financial department is responsible for managing the county's payroll. as well as processing the payments that are owed by the county, and we track county spending, and then we prepare all of the financial reports that are required by the state and the federal government. And this year we're managing $378 million. We provide payroll services to 1,340 county employees every 2 weeks and an additional 300 special purpose district employees every month. And we close about 50,000 payments or warrants every year. Our elections division is responsible for the administration and tabulation of the elections for all public offices in Kitsap County. We have 198,207 registered voters, and we are right on track where we projected to be last year. This is our busiest election year. We've already set a record in our primary that we just had in August with the most ballots counted, and we are staged now for our largest general election we will ever see. We're estimating turnout hopefully to be somewhere in the 85% range. And so that, for us, 85% of our voter turnout, that'll be 155,000 ballots. We've never seen that many ballots come through our election room in one election. So I want to thank the board with our budget and everything that you've set us up to be successful with everything we do, and you've played a big part in this success. As you're aware, Workday has been our primary focus with getting our payroll system moved over, and we did that during the presence of the pandemic. And we're moving forward even still into phase 2, which is our core financials. So we'll be moving the rest of the system over in the coming year. And that was all thanks to a lot of hard work by staff and recognition by the board that we needed to have this in place. So our budget that we have in front of you here, we're presenting you with is a budget that reflects the reduction that we were asked to give of the 10%. We vacated 2.4 positions. We have a office support specialist in recording that we vacated. We have a accounts payable technician we vacated, and a 0.4 business analyst. And I think I need to really point out that we were able to do this because of the emphasis we've put on cross-training our staff. This would not have been something that we would have been able to have handled had we have not had the support that we got from you previously and the ability to get our staff in a position so that they can function across the board. And where that comes into play is at the end of every month, as an example, we see a big surge in recorded documents and in licensing. And by having staff now in our accounts payable department, we can move them over to help manage the increase in documents that come in at the end of the month. And we've also been able to pull staff out of elections now to do the same thing, to help out with helping in recording. And so we can move staff around as needed as we see these increases. Like I said, last year we worked through the payday or payroll phase 1. We're in phase 2 now. We're expected to go live August of next year. The new system is amazing. It truly is. The stability and everything that we see, it's brought a lot of significant improvements, but we're not yet able to realize all of the budget savings that we're going to get from that, because we have a lot of manual processes still that are required to let our new system talk to our old system. So we are very hopeful, and we are seeing where we're going to be able to save time, but right now there's a lot of steps along the way. Another thing that we've been able to do in our office that has helped us a lot, especially as COVID has hit, we implemented a series of iPads and kiosk units that we've been able to utilize around the office that have helped improve the customer experience. We use them for voter registration. We use them for marriage license applications, and we're going to be moving those also into our public records room, and we'll be utilizing those for searching of documents. They're very versatile machines that have allowed us to be more flexible, and our staff can also move around with them a little bit more easily as necessary to assist with the customers. And when we do open, these will be a vital part. When we do open to the public again, these will be a vital part in how we're going to manage our customer traffic and keeping our numbers at the acceptable number for occupancy for our lobby. So we have a software system that will run off of these iPads that will help with that. Customers will be able to make appointments and we'll be able to manage that lobby traffic. With that, we've got the budget. We have a very lean budget. We don't have a lot of depth in supplies. Our services are pretty set. We do have some step increases, and you saw the reductions there. We only have one ask, I guess technically in that, and David can probably speak a little more to it, but it is for fiscal support specialist in continuation of the Workday project. This is a vital position to us through this, so we see it as necessary for being able to implement.
Sure. Paul, you want me to just explain that a little bit then?
Yes, please.
Okay. So commissioners and budget committee, just to level set you guys on the 10% reduction. It's not apparent when you go down to the bottom of the form. You'll see about, I think, a net 5%. But when you look at this 193, it essentially is 10% here of the 1.9 million. And as we had talked about in other budget briefings here, this portion here at the top, the 19,000, that is outside of the office's control. Essentially, it has to do with obligations to step increases for employees. And the direction that we took in terms of strategy was to leverage vacant positions in lieu of potential freezing wages. And so it just depends on where everybody's at. If you have a staff that's towards the top step, or they're all at the top step, then you're going to have very minimal change here. But then if you have people that are in a position where they're going to get a step increase and you have more of those people, well, then you're going to have more increase in the aggregate. And then here, the third item, the 75K, this is really a continuation of a position that was requested last year but wasn't funded. However, during the second quarter this year, there was a request made by the auditor's office to get reimbursed, if you will, on additional project expenses related to the Workday project. There was extra help brought in, there was overtime. The project, as Paul has alluded to, there was a target transition date for payroll and the HCM component of it by the end of March, and they committed to that deadline. And so there was a lot of extra work to make sure that that deadline was met. Additionally, there was a position there, which is a term limited position. And so on the second quarter, it was granted for this year, 2020. So this is just essentially a continuation of that into 2021. So just want to kind of give you some context about that relative to the project and the initial request going back to last year.
Thank you. Anything else, Paul?
I'm here to answer questions.
Okay. Are there questions, commissioners?
I have a question. So Paul, you mentioned earlier that your office, the auditor's office, had 350,000 transactions last year in Kitsap County. Was that correct?
Yes.
Can you give the public, give our advisors some examples of some of these 350,000, not all of them, of course, transactions? What type of transactions principally are we talking about?
So that when I was talking about those transactions, we were talking about in licensing. So anytime somebody buys or sells a vehicle, that transaction goes through one of the offices, either our office or one of the 5 subagents in the county to have their ownership information updated, changed to reflect that, as well as a transaction would be like a renewal on a vehicle. So in a family of 4 with 4 vehicles, you have 4 transactions just in renewals in a year. And so we have 430,000 that we're projected or we're on track for right now to hit. And that number could be a little low. The state's been having some trouble getting the renewal notices out, and we've seen a slight decline in the renewal process, but we know by the end of the year it should be catching up to that. So, but it's transactions related to ownership and renewal of your license.
Great, thank you. You also mentioned, just one final point, this upcoming election will be and you were smiling when you said this, the largest general election that we've ever seen in our county?
Yes, it is.
155,000 ballots?
155,000 ballots would represent 85% turnout. We're pretty sure we're going to be at 85, and we could be pushing 90,000. Our previous number, most ballots we ever processed was 4 years ago during the presidential election. We did 130,503 ballots.
Yeah. Wow.
And so this represents a significant increase, and throw on top of that all of the precautions and everything we have to do with the staff around COVID. It adds a challenge, but we're fortunate at this point that because the offices are closed to the public, we're able to spread out and utilize our lobby to expand our ballot processing space in a secure environment. So we're not as concerned with having this big increase at this point, given that we have available space.
Plus you have an unbelievable staff, number one. And as you very well know, I think it's state mandate. There's a canvassing board, and the board has to certify the election. Usually that's the prosecutor and you and a member of the Kitsap County Board of Commissioners. Commissioners Gelder and Garrido have asked me to participate in November. I just make sure that you're aware of that.
Yeah.
Well, technically you have to be the one because they're on the ballot.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say that.
Well, I can. It's part of the process because it's part of the transparency in understanding the responsibilities that Canvas Board has. And we are to make that final decision on ballots that were cast based on the rules that are provided to us by the state. And so it is very important that we are independent in that. And so your participation is a direct representation of how our system works and why it works so well.
See you then.
I look forward to it. We're going to have a lot of work. It goes with the nature of processing ballots.
Sounds like it's going to be a very busy year for you.
It has been so far, and it will be. It's going to wrap up very strong. We're going to be racing to the end of the year. I mean, we get 3 weeks to process these ballots, so we'll be certifying right before Thanksgiving with this election, and we're going to need all of that time. What we're seeing in elections is the trend is people are voting late. And so what we found is that more than half of the ballots that we get in any election have come in on election day or in the mail afterwards. And that adds a big impact to our office because we're staffed to handle so much, and then all of a sudden we get this influx of so many ballots that we're managing a racks and racks of ballots that we're trying to get through the system. And so when they give us a time period like this, we get an extra week for the general election, but we had 2 weeks to certify the primary election in August, and we were sitting with half of our ballots that came in last minute, and now we have 2 weeks to do everything. That means we have to validate the signature, and when we have a signature problem, we have to contact the voter to get them to fill out a form so we can verify, get a current signature on file. And that just gives us very little time to identify that there was a problem with their signature and communicate with them and get all of that information back and processed before we go to Canvas. We do have people that don't, they were concerned. They said, you didn't give me enough time to respond. And it's like, well, when you cast your ballot late, that puts it into a 2 week window already. And then we had so many ballots that came in all right at election day, that it put a lot of pressure on the staff, and we ended up working a lot of overtime trying to get through that so we could adequately inform the people that we had issues with. But this extra week will be nice, but we're going to need every minute of it because of the number, the significantly more ballots that we're going to be processing. So
That's what it sounds like. I'm very impressed with your cross-training of staff. It seems to have paid off with some really nice efficiencies.
It has.
Very impressive.
I truly believe in it, and it was one of those things that I recognized as being a way that we could be more responsible with our budget and how we operate, and being able to move staff. So it's taken us 1.5 years because some of the training does take more time, but it does allow us a lot more flexibility, and it's really proven itself during this time.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Quick question on the cross training, which I agree is definitely a very effective tool to have. You also mentioned that even you would bring in some, depending on the time of year and the workload, potentially some of the election staff into that. But given that they're not general fund and they are from the election fund, how is that managed?
We have to do it when we have money in our budget for salaries, so we can cover them off of that. Or we also have our document preservation fund. So when they're doing work for recording, the document preservation fund is there to cover those costs towards recording. So we have revenue in another fund that we can help offset that.
Other questions?
No, thanks.
This is Steve. Paul, I got a question regarding the licensing. You said 350,000 or so in that range. I'm just curious, do we still have walk-ins coming in or not?
In our office, until we can open to the public, we don't have walk-ins, but our sub-agents are able to take walk-in customers. So we have indicated that information on the doors and on our website that walk-in services are available, but we can provide every other service here as far as renewing of your tabs and all of that through the mail and through a drop-off box that we have in front of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thanks.
Yeah, this is Josh. Looking at just going back to the proposed position for the Workday project, can you tell me a little bit? I remember the Workday project in the update from last year. You said your implementation timeline is about August of 2021 for that. Are you guys on track on where you were last year? Because I think last year you were asking for some support in that as well, and pointing to kind of the efficiencies that you would create. Maybe just give me more of an update on why there's a need to hire somebody to implement the technology for Workday. One of the, I think it was, I'm going back in memory. I think it was Meredith, I think, had been implementing some new technology as well. I didn't see requests from other agency or other departments to add staff in order to implement the technology. So maybe talk more about that.
This is a position that we already had approved and implemented last year. This would be a continuation into this budget cycle of a person that we already have on staff. So part of our issue there is that payroll happens every 2 weeks. And when we have the Workday project where we're working on a timeline from an implementer and a vendor, we don't have the available resources with current staff to handle all of the processing and everything that we do every 2 weeks for payroll, as well as going through all of the implementation of software and configuration, all of that. So this position has helped offset our resource needs through implementation. And then once we implement, we'll be able to go back to a level of staff that would be consistent with regular staff.
Huh. Okay, I think I'm trying to, I didn't follow that 100%. So maybe, so it showed as new money on the request form, but you say it's a position you already have. If it's a position you already have, why would it show as new money? Chris, maybe you can help with that.
Yeah, it's not any fault to Paul so we kind of, when we did this, we approved it in 2019. We were going to fund it on a budget amendment. I think we did in 19, that portion. Same thing when we were going in to adopt 2020's budget. We put it on the list, and when it came time to balancing, this was something we pulled off of the operational budget because we looked at it in that in the short term it will go away, and so we didn't want it to be part of his base operations. Each year when we're doing our budget process, we compare adopted budget to adopted budget, and so we felt like maybe we could treat this more as a use of fund balance to the Workday project as an overall project cost. That could still be a decision by the commissioners as we move into deliberations later this month, that we could pull it off and fund it via an amendment later on. But Paul, as the auditor, needs to request that amount here at this stage.
Got it. And then I'm assuming because it's only in support of the Workday project that's going to wrap up in August 2021, that position would be a temporary position. It wouldn't be something we'd be looking at being in the budget again next year.
It's currently approved by resolution through midway through June, or I think June of 2022 is how the resolution is. And so this would still be even something that we need to talk about for 2022's budget as well.
But to get to that question, it's a term limited position, correct?
Yes.
So it's tied to that project and it's not an ongoing position. So the idea is when the work is over, that position goes away.
Right.
Got it. Well, that helps because I think sometimes staffing positions for my head, they get put in and then they just kind of stay forever. And so I'm trying to just track as we try to balance this thing long term and project, and then just having had the sheriff talk about their cuts and trying to figure out where you prioritize stuff, it helps to have that understanding. So thank you very much.
Exactly.
Good question. Anyone else?
A comment maybe, just kind of wanted to pry with David Frisk as he's on the call. I know that so for anybody that's listening that's not aware, we fund elections via the general fund for our share annually, and then our bulk of our costs happen every 2 years for the county's side. And so I know David Frisk in the elections office plan for a larger than normal budget in terms of workload and expenses in 2020. Are we still doing okay with what you anticipate this turnout to be for 2020?
Yeah, we're still doing okay. So there's areas where we're able to save money. There's things that are going to cost more than we thought they would, but we're also able to, through efficiencies, cut some in some other areas. So for example, of course, as you probably know, our biggest expense is staffing. The general staff number is static, but the overtime and election workers budget fluctuates depending on what comes in. So the more that comes in, the more we have to spend. We've had to increase the amount of funds we've paid to our election workers because we've had more ballots than ever and we anticipate more than ever. But through efficiencies, we've also been able to chop our budgeted overtime way down. So those things should even out. And in general, we should be pretty close to where we thought we would, probably coming under what we anticipated at the beginning of the year. We try to always kind of overestimate. So as an example, for next year, we're estimating that we could have, if there was a county measure on a special, we could have to supply 180,000 ballots in a February election or an April election. So we have to anticipate that. But that normally doesn't happen, but we got to be ready for it if it does. So in the end, by the end of the year, we should be coming in under what our original projections were.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Right on.
So I think something else that's relevant to election funding is that going into 21 and 22, In the even years, the county actually, not just our county, but all counties have had to pay a disproportionate amount of the election funding because in the even years, the state historically has not paid their share. They've only paid it in the odd years when they have very little on the ballot. And we've recently, last year, we were able to, the auditors worked together to pass legislation and thanking the county commissioners for your assistance in that. That starting in 21 and 22, the state will be paying their proportionate cost of all elections every year instead of just the odd year. And that will be pretty significant, especially in 2022 to the general fund.
Thank you. Anything further?
That's all we have.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you for the opportunity to present what we do.
Indeed. And we'll be looking at how many ballots you actually are counting in November.
Yeah, we'll look forward to presenting that number.
We all look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul and company. So next up, we have the Kitsap County Health District, and we have Keith Grellner and Melissa Laird in the room, and I believe ready to go. If everyone else is ready to go right into that next discussion.
Okay, great.
I'm going to call out for the budget committee. I did sneak in a document here on the budget website for the health district. I think Keith's got some stuff to share with all of us.
Okay, Keith, you're good to go.
Hey, good afternoon. I didn't know Melissa was going to be on. I appreciate her being here. She's on vacation in Montana, so I appreciate her taking the time to help me out in case I need the help.
Excellent.
So, yeah, to get right to the point, as Christopher is showing here on the screen, the Health District is respectfully requesting a status quo budget request of about $1.5 million. As you can see in Table 1, pretty much everything is status quo, but the only thing we've done is shift the minor $320 savings from our government center mortgage assistance, which went down a little bit this way just based on our amortization schedule. And we just flipped that up into our general public health flexible funding account. Christopher, if you can go ahead and scroll down a little bit to page 2. For 2021, we are proposing one big change, which really doesn't come into play with the county's or our budget request of the county, but it's the reason we have put in a request that does not include a 10% reduction as the county requested in the budget call letter. With the COVID-19 pandemic and all the expenses and activity that the health district has assumed as the lead agency in the pandemic response for the county, towards the end of July, we figured out, once we started receiving some of these state and federal monies coming in that had been promised from the beginning, but that we didn't really start to see any indication that we were actually going to get them until the middle of the summer. We are in the process of building a new program here at the district. We are building a COVID-19 program. It is a leap of faith right now that we're building this program. All the positions that we're hiring to fill the program are currently classified as provisional. We have listed them as provisional because we have not received approval from the Board of Health to continue this program into 2021. We will be strongly recommending to the Board of Health that we do that. The program essentially will include the hiring of 12 new additional FTEs to the health district to form the core of our COVID-19 work. That work is primarily case and contact investigations, care management and care coordination support, and staffing assistance to the Emergency Operations Center as we continue to work through this pandemic. We, despite some of the chatter in the news, we see absolutely no indications in the data that this pandemic will be over anytime soon. There is zero indication there will be a vaccine available and ready and distributed to everybody in the United States, let alone everybody in Kitsap County, for quite some time. And because of all that, on top of the fact that we're moving into flu season, we're moving into, unfortunately, fall and winter, where people start spending a lot more time inside. We're also looking at trying to help get schools reopened. If and when the governor pulls back on allowing counties to move to new phases of his safe reopening plan, more businesses could be reopened. And what that means before a vaccine is ready, distributed, and provided to everybody, or at least 70% of the population, it means our risk in Kitsap County, Washington State, and the United States of additional outbreaks and increases in cases and upswings in work related to the pandemic are extremely likely. And we are proposing to continue this. Well, we're building the program based upon these limited revenues that we've received that have to be spent by the end of November 2020. Most of it is CARES Act funding, which I know the county is intimately familiar with. So we're building this program. We're hoping that additional funds will come through for 2021. We currently have earmarked state and federal monies for 2021 in the realm of about $1.3 million, $1.4 million. So we have about enough revenue right now to carry us through June at the rate we've been expending it. If the health board approves us continuing this program into 2021. Again, we're going to recommend strongly that we continue this program. The health district tried from February through July of this year to do it on our own, to do it with existing staff. And we learned from experience that it's just not enough, especially when we deal with surges like we did in July. We're fully expecting surges this fall again for all the reasons I've already discussed. And we've also figured out, based upon a lot of input from the community and from our elected leaders, that it's not really acceptable or wise to continue to use our existing staff and shut all of our existing programs and legal mandated work down to do COVID work, because then it hurts the rest of the services in the county. Citizens don't get the services they need and expect, and it actually harms the recovery for the county from the stay home, stay healthy order that the governor issued earlier this year that we're still trying to climb out of. So for all those reasons, we are proposing the inclusion of this program for 2021. Again, we have state and federal revenues that we think will carry us through at least to May or June of next year based on our current spending levels. We will be prepared during surges to pull in existing health district staff, as we have done before, to assist the COVID-19 program as needed. Christopher, could you scroll down a little bit more, please? Yeah, let's go all the way down to the attachments, if you don't mind. So as Christopher's doing that, again, for all those reasons I just went through, that is why the health district's respectfully not requesting a 10% cut. A 10% cut of county funding would equal about $150,000 for the health district. While that cut, if we are required to take it, will not irreparably harm us, it does make our lives more difficult with trying to build this program and trying to maintain existing services and mandated work. As you can see, this first attachment, this is the agency level roll-up of our proposed 2021 budget. And Christopher, if you can go down to the bottom line, if you don't mind, on that page. As you can see, our budget right now with the inclusion of this new COVID-19 program increases from 13.2 million that we had in 2020 to about 13.5 million, excuse me, to 14.6 million for 2021. And that is entirely, that entire increase of $1 million odd is that COVID-19 program that we're talking about. As you can see in the fund balance column here down at the beginning, at this point, and it is early still, our budget is balanced, but it is requiring the use of about $600,000 of reserve funds. And Christopher, if you can scroll down to the next attachment, please. Yeah, you can go all the way through expenditures down to the revenue or the, well, let's stop here before I get to the reserves. This chart just briefly shows the increase in FTEs for that COVID-19 program. Again, it's about 12 FTEs over the last couple years. All right, Christopher, go ahead and keep going. And thank you for being my navigator here. As you can see, this is our reserve sheet as of the end of July. We have combined designated, restricted, and operating funds of about $5 million right now. Approximately 2.4 million of that are restricted funds. So we can only use those for the programs that they're targeted for under board budget policy. We also have our designated funds, which are about 400 to 500,000 that we have. And then we have the remaining funds of about 2.6 million, which we call our operating reserve, which by board budget bylaws, we have to have 2 months of operating expenses in reserve. So between that 2.6 million of operating funds and our 2.4 of restricted funds, we do meet that budget bylaw goal for operating expenses in reserve. So again, in summary, we are requesting a status quo budget request of the county of $1.5 million. That equals approximately 10% of our overall health district budget for 2021, which is about on par for what we've had for the last decade. The majority of our budget, or over 80% of our budget, is staffing, and that went up a little bit for our proposal for 2021 as compared to 2019 and 2020, and that's because of that COVID-19 program that we're proposing to add. That's nearly all staffing. Lastly, before we can get into questions and answers, I will mention that part of the monies that we're using to build this program and that to sustain this program at least halfway through 2021 are based on these state and federal COVID funds that are starting to roll through. About 1.4 million of those funds we have put off from spending in 2020 so that we can roll them into 2021 to help buffer our COVID work as we move forward. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap up and entertain any questions or comments from the committee.
Okay, well, I apologize. Go ahead.
Oh, just a quick one, I hope. And that is, so Do you have greater flexibility with the dollars that you're getting from the feds or the state than we do? Maybe more on the state side.
No, it's pretty much the same as the federal CARES monies, the requirements for spending. There's a couple little nuances that I would have to get you the detail on, but for the most part, it's pretty comparable to the CARES Act funding, other than some of the spending deadlines.
So then I missed something. How are you able to carry funding forward into 2021?
So the funding that we're carrying forward into 2021, one of them, it's a branch off of CARES, but it's called ELK, Environment Laboratory, and something else. I forget what it stands for, but I could get that for you. But under the ELK grant funding that we applied for with WSALFO, that funding actually goes through, can go through up to February 28th of 2022. And there's another state funding pot. The DOH general fund state COVID monies that we're receiving, which is about 300,000, those actually go through the biennium, so June of 2021. So it's just those two pots of money that we can carry forward beyond November 30th of this year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. And I guess I will also add, since it's in my letter, but I forgot to cover it. The Health District was offered on September 1st an additional $5.4 million of CARES Act funding, similar to the county. It also has to be spent by November 30th of this year. There's no way the Health District will be able to make full use of that money. We've kind of earmarked in talking with Eric and Ami that we might need up to $1 million. I think that's going to be on the high end of that money, of those funds that we might need to close out this year. So the bulk of it, at least 4.4 million, if not more, we're working with the county and the Emergency Operations Center to, however we need to do it, make those funds available for the short time that we have to use them for the good of the whole community beyond the Health District. And yeah, and now I wrap it up.
When did those funds become available?
We still do not have a contract for them. They were offered to us on September 1st, right before our last board meeting. They have to be spent by November 30th, and we're expecting the contract from the Department of Health to come through for those funds sometime in the next week or so.
It seems like an amazingly short turnaround.
It is. It's extremely frustrating that the state held those monies and is releasing them now at this late stage in the game when they have to be spent by November 30th. So yeah, we agree with you.
Well, is there any way to plead to lengthen that?
We've been pleading, and as of yet, we have not been told that there's any flexibility on those dollars because they are related to those federal CARES Act dollars.
Yeah, but federal CARES should be paying attention, especially to health.
They should.
Just saying. Other questions, comments?
I think, Chairman Garrido, any other year, we would say thank you for that status quo budget, because we've been working on status quo budgets for at least the last 2 or 3 years. Of course, all three of the commissioners serve on or have served on the health board, policy board. So we're pretty familiar with what's happening. I think we all agree that it's been a tough road trip for public health, Kitsap County Public Health since March. Tough road trip. There's a great testimony to your leadership and the staff. But having said that, the sheriff said this morning, in his budget hearings, 24/7 crisis period, sheriff's words, during the budget hearing. We'll work our way through this, and money may not come to public health as soon as we would like to have it, but we are working. We work well together. The county works extremely well, county government extremely well with public health. My question is there any opportunity at all, maybe this is a Commissioner Gelder question, to get better support and passage in the legislature in Olympia for foundational health?
That is that is a loaded question. The legislature did make some strides on that front, but they did not fully fund what the estimates were that it would take to fully fund foundational public health. So we'll I'm sure have a good conversation about it this next legislative session, because we went from back-to-back issues with public health. We had the whole measles thing a year ago or so, or a year and a half ago. We now have COVID. On many levels, probably public health has to be able to respond and assist when it comes to, smoke and so on and so forth. There's any number of things that will come down the road that we need to be able to fund, but it's not there.
Yeah, so for 2020, Kitsap Public Health, we received the most funding yet from Foundational Public Health Services money. And that was a grand total of about $250,000. That barely, that doesn't cover even remotely any of our communicable disease work, let alone the rest of COVID work. So yeah, unfortunately, as hard as the legislature might be working on public health's behalf, it has not come through with any funding of significance for public health up to this point.
Thanks.
Other comments or questions?
I got a question for Keith. This is Steve. Keith.
Steve.
Hi. This COVID-19 program that you started here in 2020, I assume it's going to go through 2022 because things aren't going to be cleaned up for a while. Are you going to be involved in any of the vaccine distribution here in the county, or how is that going to be handled here locally?
It's a great question, Steve. There is not a lot of detail on that yet. It is, it starts with the federal government. We know that the federal government is engaging the states right now. We have a meeting this afternoon at 4:30 with the State Department of Health. They're going to provide us with another update, which will partially include what they've learned over the last week or two about vaccine distribution. What we do know at this point, again, is very little, but we're expecting, well, let's start with what we know. What we know is the federal government intends to follow past procedures where they will distribute through the states vaccines as they become available. We are told, this isn't in writing yet anywhere, we are told that the vaccines will be free of charge, but that the states and locals will probably have to figure out how to cover the costs of distribution of the vaccines and actual vaccinations. We're expecting that because it's been mostly a private effort, that there may be 3 to 4 different companies and different vaccines that we'll be dealing with. It's our understanding that at least 2 of the vaccines that may be approved will require refrigeration or freezing all the way through until the shots are actually delivered, which is going to drive up the cost of distribution and vaccination clinics. We are being told that the vaccination series will require 2 vaccinations, and they'll be required to be given between 21 and 28 days, both shots. So at this point, it's going to be a highly complicated, possibly very expensive process for locals once it gets to our level. It is our understanding at this point, based upon what the plans tentatively are, is that local health will be working with state health to try and figure out how we're going to get these shots to everybody in the community. It's our understanding that it could be anywhere from 6 months to 3 or 4 years before the full community, or at least 70% of the population, can be vaccinated, because it's going to take that long to manufacture them all. So there will have to be a prioritization and a tiered application of the vaccines, which again is just going to make all of our lives miserable. So yeah, there's a little bit known, a lot unknown. We expect that we will be involved to some degree. The health district's already working with our emergency operations center to develop a countywide vaccination plan that at this point, it needs to be really flexible, since we're so short on details of what will be required and how it will happen, but we're at least putting the framework together. And it's, if we think COVID testing is challenging, and we've been getting an earful on that, I expect this vaccination issue is going to be every bit as challenging, if not more so.
Well, where I was heading with my question, Keith, is we talked about this $5 million worth of CARES money that we can't adequately spend. Is there any way you can front load COVID-19 vaccine, whatever you want to call it, refrigeration units, whatever, with some of that money, or is that illegal?
Well, that's a really good question. And yes, we are looking into that. Liz Clute and I, Liz, the director of DEM, we're looking at, with the county's help, additional warehouse space and possible refrigeration units to help us with any vaccines that we might get that will require refrigeration or freezing. The risk with that and the challenge with that is if we end up receiving vaccine supplies that don't require refrigeration or freezing, we could be sitting on a sizable supply of materials that we tried to purchase up front that we won't be able to use. But we're looking at that, and we are definitely thinking about that, yes.
So Keith, I have a question. Hopefully the state distribution system, testing, PPEs, masks will work a little better with vaccine than it has during the past few months. My question is, and maybe I should know the answer to this. You said there are 3 or 4 companies that are working on a vaccine. I know there's one in Germany. I know there's one in Britain. We have our own companies here, Merck or whoever is doing it, Pfizer. Are they 3 or 4 different vaccines nationally?
Yes, that's what we're being told.
And how does this is really a policy question, if you can answer it. How does the everyday person, citizen in Kitsap County know which vaccine to take if they're different?
Well,
effectiveness?
Yeah, they'll all be approved, or when they're approved, they'll all be for COVID-19. And so we'll receive that guidance at that time. If any one of them are specifically targeted towards certain sectors of the population versus others. Mm-hmm. But what they're telling us right now is they're all intended for the general population. They just may be several different variations of vaccines for the same disease, if that makes sense. That may exist right now with like some of our flu shots and stuff. I don't know. And I could ask Dr. Morrow and we could follow up with that. But I think it's just a matter of, because they're rushing so hard to come up with vaccines, that there just may be several different recipes, if you may, for vaccines that are approved, each one of them with their own care characteristics, and we're just going to get what we get, and we have to deal with it with whatever version that we get. But they're intended for everybody. There'll just be different versions.
I'm going to take the one that you and our health director, Dr. Burrow, take. Whatever you're taking, that's what I'm taking.
All right.
Anything else? We have 6 minutes if there's another question or comment. Last call. Well, thank
hearing
you, Keith
none.
and Melissa. Pardon?
Yeah, hearing none, Commissioner. I just want to again thank the county for their support. There's no way we could do what we do without the county's support. The commissioners have been leaders on our board, and we really appreciate that. We know we're in for a rough go, and we'll just continue to work together, especially for this 5.4 million. And we're open to be as creative as possible to figure out how we can make best use of that money for the greater community. And again, thank you for entertaining our request.
Thank you, and thank you, Melissa, for joining you today.
And your staff. Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Everyone's been doing a stellar job. Appreciate it.
And again, kudos to the 3 staff that the county has loaned us. They are doing fantastic work.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. So next up we have Public Works, and we are rounding up folks to get ready for that one. So if it's okay with everyone, let's take about a 10-minute break so we can get Public Works all set up and get started with them. They are the last department to present. So thanks, Keith. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Is 10 minutes enough? Do you want 15?
Let's do 15, please.
Okay. Let's do it.
So we'll be back at 2:40.
Thank you.
2:40. Thanks.
Thank you. So for the Public Works folks that are popping up on the attendee list, I will start moving you over to panelists. You'll come over muted, so just hang tight until we're ready to start. So I'll move Andy over, and then if you're able, Andy, to tell me who else you'd like to have come over with you, that'd be great. Dave Tucker, I presume. And Keith.
Amber, this is Andy. I've got
Hi.
Joe Rutan and Jackie Carney with me in our conference room. We should have Keith Swearingen should be a separate move over, as well as Dave Tucker. And then there could be a plethora of other Public Works senior program managers that would include Stella, Michelle, Chris Piercy, Tina Nelson, Jock Dean, Jeff Shea, or perhaps Christy DeGeis sitting in for Jeff Shea.
Okay, I see a handful of those folks. Would you like for me to move them over? If they come over as panelists, they'll have the ability to speak if need be.
I would like for them to have the ability to speak, yes.
Okay, I'm working on it.
So let me put in a kudos for Cetus Brooks down in your group. Very belatedly wrote some questions. She jumped right
Okay.
on it.
Bringing over Cetus and Mike Eddy as well. I think that's all the Public Works folks that have come in as attendees. Keep an eye out for anybody else in the next few minutes.
She was very helpful and things set up. Yeah.
Amber, you're not muted.
Oh, did you just hear that big sigh?
No, but I just noticed you were not muted, so I thought I'd give you a heads up.
I think I just stretched and sighed loudly. I'll go ahead and mute myself.
Amber, this is Andy. I see Chris Piercy is in the attendees list still. Could you bring him over as a panelist?
Yes. There you go.
I think we said we'd start at 240, but I don't see Commissioner Wolf yet. Let me just check here. There you go. He just turned his mic on.
Okay, Andy, you guys are muted, so if you want to talk, make sure you unmute.
Whenever you're ready. Commissioner Wolf, are you on?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, commissioners and members of the Budget Committee, as well as others participating and members of the public. This is Andrew Nelson. I'm the Public Works Director. We have a number of team members from Public Works on the call with us this afternoon. You'll primarily hear from Keith Swearingen, our Equipment Services Division Senior Program Manager, from Dave Tucker, our Assistant Director for the Utilities Division, and Joe Rutan, our Assistant Director for the Roads Division. Could I just confirm that my sound is good and that everybody can hear me okay?
Good.
I think so.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to discuss the proposed Public Works budget for 2021. As you're aware, we're a large and diverse department with over 30 different funds in 4 major service areas that you see listed here. Dave Tucker will brief each of the 3 utility division proposed budget, and Joe Rutan will discuss the road proposed budget, and Keith Swearingen will talk through the equipment rental and revolving fund. Had a number of team members changes over the course of the last year. So Chris, if you could go to the next slide, I'd like to point out new team members for Public Works. I took over as the Public Works Director in 2014, and until 2020, we had the original team intact. But during the course of 2020, we've had 4 senior leaders within Public Works retire. And with Jackie Carney coming on board just Monday of this week as our new financial manager leading our support services division, the Public Works team is now reconstructed. So the others that I'd like to point out include Joe Rutan taking over for John Brand as the county engineer and leader of our road division, and then 2 senior program managers in utilities. Chris Piercy replaced Pat Campbell in February of this year, and Michelle Perdue replaced Chris May, who retired in March of 2020. So real pleased to have everybody on board and have some excellent candidates in here who are well versed and understand the Public Works mission and will be able to carry it forward. I'll just make a couple of brief overview comments about where we're at in the Public Works budget, and then I'll turn it over to each of the briefers. The board and the budget office gave clear guidance to Public Works to present a balanced budget for 2021. Some of the restrictions that have been placed upon the general fund and some of the other funds don't fully apply to Public Works because of our enterprise funds and special revenue funds approach to executing the Public Works mission. We've done a complete evaluation of our forecasts for revenues through the end of 2020, as well as the 2021 budget year, and have discussed with the board those adjustments that we've made in 2020 in order to ensure that we balance our expenses with our projected revenues. We see that our utility rates are generally intact for 20 as well as 2021. There were set programmed rate increases for some of the utilities, and our budget forecasts are based upon those. We've had a good track record so far in 2020, despite some of the economic challenges for people, that they're paying their utility rates, and we're still having robust activity on the tipping floor at the Olympic View Transfer Station. We've also seen that property taxes for the first half of the year were generally compliant and people came in. So that means that road levy fund revenues are close to being as predicted, as well as the solid waste, or excuse me, the stormwater fees that are paid along with property taxes. The COVID experience has been an interesting process for Public Works to go through. All Public Works employees are considered as essential employees. However, we took a hard look based upon the risks during the COVID experience to only complete the work operations that were critical for ensuring the health and safety of the Public Works services and the customers that we help. So our sewer utility ran full strength. We had to cut back in roadway maintenance based on only ensuring the safety and integrity of the traveling public. And we adjusted our other requirements in engineering and construction based on those projects that were considered essential. But we're really essentially back to full operations now across the Public Works forum. So we're in good shape for 2020, and I think we're going to be able to balance things for 2021. So unless there's any specific questions for me before we begin, I'll pause for a moment before I turn things over to Keith Swearingen to discuss the equipment rental and revolving fund.
Are there any questions for Andy?
No, thank you.
Okay.
All right, then I'll turn things over to Keith to discuss equipment rental and revolving fund.
Excellent.
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners and members of the budget committee that are there. I watched for a few presentations earlier today to get an idea of what you guys were looking for and wanting to hear about. So I've got kind of an idea of what's been going on. On the screen right now is what we have submitted for 2021. All of the lines are in line for what you were requesting, with one exception that I'll get into a little more depth in a few minutes on. But on the revenues, we've decreased the revenues through the rental side by some. Finally, we've been working since 2010 to get the rental funds, the reserve funds, healthy. Been a long process. We're now in our 10th, or well, it'll be 10th year, but 9 years to get those recovered. Because they have got to that level, we did pull them back this year, knowing what was going on, and to give some assistance specifically to the general fund. We also did pull back some of the revenues for the Public Works, the DCD, the other divisions as well. The other thing that is on this sheet that I want to call out is the other expenses, the miscellaneous other expenses. That is the one line that went up. That line went up because we have more vehicles and equipment programmed for next year for replacement. I wanted to call that out because for those that are not aware, the reserve fund carries the balance of what is required in the specific age of a piece of equipment, its replacement value. So we are healthy there, and we have plenty of money to buy what is necessary for the equipment for the foreseeable future. We also had some items that we didn't buy in 2020 that I carried over into 2021 that reflects on this $4,431,000. So just to be aware, that is a very healthy fund balance. I think Chris can talk a little bit about it if he'd like to, but we do not consider that as part of the reduction because it is sitting in the reserves. Chris, would you like to elaborate on that any before I go to the others?
No, you covered it for me, thanks.
Okay. Well, again, talking about the revenue reductions, well, actually, Chris has got it here. So let me go ahead and take this where he has it. So at the moment, our supplies were reduced by $9,000. These supplies are the tools and the small computer equipment. We supply from Equipment Services all of the tools for the mechanics. So we do have a reasonable amount of money in there. And we went on notice this past year, cut back, be very careful what we have to replace. We have to do work, so we do replace where necessary, but we're not buying additional things that are more wanted items instead of needed items. I think that's the best way to explain that. So just be aware that we were able to pull that $9,000 from those two areas. The $7,700 is in training and conferences. No conferences also were attended this year. Trainings were reduced this year. So that's 2020, and we're carrying it forward into 2021 the same way. Again, this line I was talking about a few minutes ago, the $4,431,000 from last year, the $5,084,500 for this year, that is with the additional equipment replacement items. The interfund items and the transfers, those are internal pieces that we really don't have control over. So I really won't elaborate on those. Again, our status quo was $12,938,695. Our request is higher because of the equipment that we are planning to purchase in 2021. But in reality, the rest of the budget is reduced as was request. I would like to also call out two other things Chris and I were talking about, and I want to make sure that it was talked about. We, in Equipment Services, are reducing the 2020 operating budgets for the general fund by right at $200,000 in a reduction of our rent in November and December. I am pulling the trigger on this because, as I explained, our reserve funds are finally where they need to be. And in helping those general fund accounts, we are pulling back the banking money in the rent. This is the bank money for future replacements by a total of about $200,000 for this year at the end of the year. I will make those adjustments in November and December. It does take 2 months to make that adjustment in my billing cycles. And then we've also done the same thing, or very close to the same thing, for the 2021. We've reduced, as I mentioned before, the rental that we are charging in 21, not only for the general fund accounts, but also for the Public Works and DCD and the others by about a like amount. It's right at the $200,000. Again, this is diminishing from their bank balances, but again, if you heard that a minute ago, that's about a month and a half to 2 months worth of how much I'm not collecting. So that can be recovered in the near years ahead. I do not believe at any problem as long as we recover like we're anticipating and wanting to. So this is a thing that we were able to do to help the general fund. And I also carried it across into the others because we are finally healthy with those balances for future replacements. So I believe that covers pretty much all of it that is on this. I didn't go line by line because I know you've all looked at it. And like I said, I think the main thing to look at is the 2020 budget compared to the submission. The dollar difference is the increase in the vehicles and equipment to be replaced this year that is already banked and ready to be spent. I think with that, I can answer any questions anybody might have. I do want to, I'll plug one more item before I go to the questions. You guys always like to know when a change in the fleet has happened. We have changed for the sheriff their powertrain. So the vehicles that they had been buying were naturally aspirated. In the end of 2019, Ford announced that they were bringing a hybrid engine into their powertrain. We brought one vehicle in at the end of 2019 and have been driving it now in 2020. The sheriff talked to me, actually the undersheriff talked to me about mid-year and said, this is the vehicle we want. If the data shows that it is doing what it's supposed to do, which is about a 20% reduction in fuel, we would like to see if we can move forward. The fuel cost pencils out to where it becomes a purchase neutral item in about 2.5 years, which means beyond 2.5 years, we start saving on fuel. So we discussed it. We had the money in the bank to make that change. And we now have 9 more of those vehicles that are due in the next month for future replacement. That said, I also added one to the juvie department. They haven't picked it up yet. It is ready for them. They need to put about another 2,000 miles on the vehicle they're currently driving to get to the replacement criteria. And then they will also be in a vehicle that is a hybrid. Now then, I'll shut up and I'll hand it back to you guys. If there's any questions, be glad to answer anything.
Nice and straightforward. Thank you, Keith. Are there questions or comments for Keith? I look forward to seeing those hybrids.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. This is Andy again. I'll just make mention that you saw one less FTE in Keith's division for 2021. Typically, he's been carrying 16 FTEs, and we're showing 15 funded FTEs in 2021. That's not a change in total requirements for Equipment Services Division. It's just that the budget office has given us the opportunity to not fund positions in 2021 and not pay benefit bucket contributions for them. So you'll see 8 other positions as we go through the rest of the Public Works presentations that are in that same category. So these are positions that were basically frozen by the board because of the COVID situation. So just wanted to point that out, that you'll see that in the other presentations as well. Okay, so we can go to the sewer utility, and I'll turn things over to Dave Tucker.
Good afternoon. As Andy said, my name is David Tucker. I work with the sewer, storm, and solid waste programs. So we'll cover sewer first. As you can see, there's a slight reduction in total expenses proposed for 2021 versus 2021 versus 2020. Just want to point out the difference in revenue. That it's about a little less than $5 million. That money is used for really for 2 purposes. One, you can see our transfer out line is fairly large. It's about $5 million. That's money is used to cover our debt service. We have a series of bonds, municipal bonds, as well as low interest loans through the state that we pay principal and interest on every year. As part of our bond rating process, we guarantee that we're going to bring in more revenue than we expend. And the ratio the higher the ratio is of the money we have extra versus our bond payments, gives us a higher debt service coverage. We currently guarantee we'll have a 125. We try to budget for at least a 1.5. This calculates out to probably about a 1.8 or so. And then we normally use that money in our capital program, which we'll talk about with the board in November. Otherwise, pretty much status quo there. I'll just run through the major changes here on the back sheet. The supplies area, it's really a combination of a couple of large projects that we did in 2020 that we're not doing in 2021. Some valves that were replaced at Central Kitsap Treatment Plant. Some carbon odor work was done then that we're not going to be doing again. The big projects we are doing that need large supplies are the aeration basins at Central Kitsap Treatment Plant. Folks, if you don't know how those work, essentially air is diffused up through the bottom of a series of cement cells. They have these diffusers on them, and they degrade over time. It looks like a lot of them need to be replaced. So a large chunk of that $111,000 is to buy some replacements. And we're also finishing up an industrial network for the system. That'll be a network that connects all our systems together that is off the internet. It's something a lot of other utilities have. We're a little bit behind the curve on that, but we're trying to get that up and running. For services, you can see that almost everything is down. That's because we had some one-time expenses in the repair and maintenance area. Those were related to our cogen systems and pumps, and we bought a scissor lift in 2020. Obviously, we're not doing those things in 2021. The operations rentals, we were looking to do a cured in place pipe system in 2020. It ended up being too expensive, so we didn't end up buying that. That's the bulk of that $325,000. And then as shown, that $160,000 is just a lot of small things, the largest of which in 2021, we ended up buying a duplicate root foamer. It's a device that goes on those big eductor trucks you see us working in our sewer and storm system with. We only had one eductor truck with a root foamer. It was having some mechanical problems, and so we got behind on our work, and so we decided to buy a second one, so we had a redundant system. Again, that was a 2020 expenditure. Land and equipment, about $500,000 of that land and equipment is set aside. We're looking to try to buy an adjacent piece of land that's next to the Central Kitsap Treatment Plant. The current owner wants significantly more than $500,000 for it now. It's not really assessed that high. If in fact it gets down to the $500,000 level, we like to purchase that land, give us some room for expansion and a little bit more buffer room. The current operations on that site actually end up causing us some problems. Generates a lot of dust, and it has caused some problems with our cogeneration system. So if we can buy that land out, it would be a benefit for the utility. Interfund, as Keith said, that's really determined by other folks. And then operating transfers out, that's good news. Not too long ago, we refinanced some bonds from 2010, and we were able to get a much better rate. So we are paying less in our on our bonds than we have in the past. Any questions about the sewer utility?
Anyone? Looks like you're good to go.
Okay, so we'll run through storm. The storm, you can see where we have two of those positions that Andy referred to earlier for being frozen. So we're going only funding 34.5 this year. You can see the budget revenues are exceed expenditures, and we are reducing our expenditures from 2020 versus 2021. Chris, you can go to the next page, please. Again, those salary and benefit reductions you can see there with this with the frozen staff. The 2018 in supplies, as Chris's staff noted, a bunch of small things. Among them, we do a lot of work in our pipe network with catch basins and pipes. They end up having a fairly high inflationary rate. We're looking at maybe another $70,000 to buy the same amount of material that we bought in 2020. The other big item in there is if you've been out to the annex, you'll notice that all the roofs have boxes that have rain gardens in them that we use to filter the water coming off the metal roofs. We're proposing to do that at a couple of road shops as well. That's a little bit less than $30,000. The rest is just really small stuff in a bunch of different areas. The other professional services reduction of about $182,000. Most of that is $175,000 reduction in our drainage retrofit on private property program. It's been very hard to implement that program during COVID. We still are funding it, but we're funding it to a much lower level just because we haven't been able to set up projects with individuals, since it's hard to do that in today's current situation. Again, there's the services is a series of things in different areas. The largest two are we reduced the marketing contract and our education outreach by about $10,000, and then a couple of large pieces of equipment that we would buy and put into the ER&R fund for Keith's staff to manage. We're programmed for 2020. That was about $215,000, and we're not doing that again in 2021. Down in the transfers out, we did take on some debt for the a low interest loan for the Department of Ecology for one of the phases of the ridgetop improvement, and the debt service on that project. It's about a 10-year loan, and the debt service is at $117,000. Any questions about storm?
Anyone?
No.
Okay, last but not least, we have the solid waste program. You can see it's a slight increase this year over last, but as with the other funds, we have ample projected revenue to cover it. And we're looking at the same number of employees as last year. The supplies and services, as with other ones, that's just a bunch of small changes to a bunch of different programs. The other professional services item, that's something that we've talked to the board about a couple of different times. That is the additional costs associated with having waste management haul recyclable material from the Walala, Silverdale, and Hansville recycling and garbage facilities. As we've talked about before, that contract was a much larger contract than prior contracts, and that's where we're seeing that $300,000 increase. 18 and 12 relatively small things in a bunch of different areas. And then for the first time, we've taken out debt through the solid waste program to finance some improvements at the Silverdale Garbage and Recycle Facility. Earlier this year, we took out about $6 million in bonds. Got less than 1%, was a really great deal. Amber and her team did a great job helping us out with that, but that's where that $435,000 is coming from. That's bringing on paying those bonds down. Anybody have any questions on solid waste?
Anyone?
No, thanks.
All righty, well, I'll turn it over to Joe, and he can talk to you the wonderful world of roads.
Thanks.
The wonderful world of roads. This is Joe Rutan, and I think the first thing that I'd like to point out to you on the road is the How We Got Here program that has been going on for several years, and that the Public Works Department has laid out this our financial future, and this is where the chickens have come home to roost this year. In 2020, there was no transfer from the capital program, from the maintenance program to the capital program. In 2021 will be the first year that we actually will be moving $3.5 million from the capital program to the operations program, which is different, as you're aware, than has happened in years past. Prior to 2020, there was leftover money in the operations side of the account that we could put to capital. Once again, 2020, there was no movement of money from one side to the other, and in 2021, we'll be proposing a $3.5 million transfer out of capital into operations. You'll note that
we're showing a total revenue of about $3.2 million less than the total expenses. That's because we wanted to highlight that we will need to develop our capital program with that $3.5 million transfer into operations to balance that. The other thing I'd like to point out on that is the revenue that we show for 2021 includes the lesser amount for traffic diversion in 2021. We're showing about $600,000 less in traffic diversion, which then shows up as we have that much more revenue available in 2021. Since that diversion actually comes off of our income before the money goes into the road fund. So those are two important points to note. Once again, that $600,000 is included in our revenue, and that we will be producing a capital budget to move $3.5 million into this operations budget. Going down to the FTEs, back up a little bit. You'll see that we go from 150 employees in 20 to 144 in 21. Those are the remaining, the 6 of the 8 that Andy had mentioned that we are still carrying as employees, but not funding or paying into the benefit buckets right now. The money that we're saving from that, in addition to some of the money that we're saving with some of the lag time in our hires, we've had to hire several people, a couple in the management team and other staff, and we've had some savings in that lag time in between when a person leaves and we get someone new on. Moving down to the individual items. Status quo and the step increase is pretty straightforward. Staffing changes, you'll see those are 6 frozen positions. The supplies, pretty straightforward. In services, I think a big one to mention here is that $141,615,000 for surface water management. That is an increase in our surface water fee that we're experiencing. The $94,000 in other professional services, mainly out of our maintenance operations group. $50,000 for additional support for geoengineering, some roadway pavement ratings, and also some additional costs for CDLC. Moving down, the last one, that operating transfer out. That is a combination of about $51,000 for refunding bonds for a 2011 bond, $137,000 for a 2015 bond, and $16,000 for additional computer issues. That is pretty straightforward. Most of the questions I would imagine I would leave you with are in my first statements up on the revenue and expenditure side. With that, I open myself to questions.
Anyone?
No questions.
So please remember that when we're back in front of you with the capital budget.
Remember what? That there were no questions?
That we're counting on approving that capital budget with a $3.5 million transfer into this operation budget.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Greeter, this is Steve. I have a question.
Go ahead.
For Joe. Joe, you talked about this capital money being, if you will, moved into the operations bucket for 2021. I don't remember the dollar amount. It's probably not important. I was under the impression the capital money was a special color money and it only could be used on capital projects. Is that true or not true?
That's not quite true. Road fund money is certainly a different color, and there are different rules that we have to use when doing capital work versus maintenance work. But road fund money can be used for any road fund purpose.
So you're saying the road fund money was actually the capital money you're referring to, is that correct?
I think what might be talking about here is the way that traditionally Kitsap County Public Works has managed their funds is their vehicle fuel tax goes into the capital program, and the real estate tax goes to our operations. And that's how just this county has chosen to manage that. And once again, in the past, there was motor vehicle tax money left over. There was real estate tax money left over to move up to capital to be with that motor vehicle tax, make our capital program more robust. This year, there was no movement of money, and next year there will be movement of those real estate taxes. There'll be the motor vehicle tax moving to the operations and combining with the real estate tax to fund our operations.
Okay, basically you're saying it's the right color money for the right job, correct?
Yes.
Got it.
It was a long-winded answer to your very good summary right there. Thank you.
Anyone else?
No, thanks.
Well, that was pretty straightforward and concise. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate the interest from the board in the Public Works budgets. It's about $100 million that is mixed up in all of these funds when you put them all together. But it's a team of professionals that has been executing this budget, for decades now, and it's all about delivering the services that the people of Kitsap need to live, work, and play in Kitsap County. There's nothing here that's not a requirement to provide the goods and services that the people of Kitsap need in order to do that. So appreciate the interest from the panel. If there are other questions that come up during your deliberations, we're all available to answer any follow-up.
Before you go, though, just following up on with Steve's question, that there is, I think, we talk about sort of the capital projects, but there's a lot of preservation and maintenance activities that happen out of the operating side of it. So it's not that physical things aren't happening as part of that, whether it's snow plowing or chip sealing or whatever, those types of things do occur out of the operating fund, correct?
Correct.
And
correct.
Could you also then, since we have the time, we've talked about sort of this shift over between, last year, this year to next year in terms of how those dollars are moving. Can you share a little bit more with the committee to a little sort of what the out years look like? I know Public Works has done a tremendous amount of effort over the past year or so, really telling the story and sharing that with the community about sort of what we do with the funding we have, and basically we're going to be able to do less as costs go up, as revenues diminish. There is somewhat of a timeline on that one.
Yes, you hit it exactly. Will be, our level of service will be impacted by this. Certainly, safety, preservation are high priorities, and what gets second shift is capacity problems. So, you may experience more delay, more capacity issues. Hopefully, we can keep on top of the preservation and safety issues to keep the system functional. We right now are planning on continuing that $3.5 million transfer from the capital side, motor vehicle tax, to the operation side, real estate tax, for the next at least 6 years on the 6-year transportation improvement program that we'll be providing. We have talked about how we address that long-term, whether it be continued changes in our level of service or addressing the revenue side.
Joe, maybe I can help to put this in some numbers context. Our 6-year transportation improvement program, where we do major capital projects to address roadway system on the 915 miles of county roads. Over the course of the last 5 to 10 years, we've been executing between 16 and $20 million of annual construction placement. And that's based on the availability of these capital funds that we use in order to do those major improvement projects. Projects like the Buckland Hill Bridge or Silverdale Way widening, or
replacing Flora.
The Lake Flora Bridge replacement projects, those major projects. Our revenue projections for the out years in the 6-year transportation improvement program show a declining balance of available capital projects in the range of $5 to $6 million of annual construction projects to be able to be constructed each year. As Commissioner Gelder mentioned, we've gone through quite an extensive process of developing our needs and requirements to not only preserve and maintain our system, but to meet the requirements of growth management based on the comprehensive plan in Kitsap County. And we feel we need an average annual construction placement in the realm of $13 to $14 million to stay ahead of the comprehensive plan requirements, as well as meet the capital replacement projects for failing pavements and safety requirements on our road system. So that's the shortfall. We've been executing close to $20 million a year in annual construction placement. We need $12 to $14 million a year in order to keep up with the demands of growth management. But our projections within the 6-year horizon show only about $6 million of funding available to address those needs.
So we will be addressing revenue options with you.
Commissioner, did that get after your question?
It did. Thank you. I appreciate that additional, because we talk about sort of, it's a moving target, and we have been able to successfully deliver a pretty high level over the years, but the dollars don't necessarily support our ability to continue to do that without something changing. So I appreciate that. And while we have you all here, I think that often, when folks are thinking about our road system, don't always differentiate between, city, county, and state. And we have a lot of needs, especially when you're moving volumes of traffic. We definitely have capacity project needs within the state system that impacts our own local road system, but there's always that bleed over because it is a system. And I just want to give a shout out to our public works staff for really taking the lead on trying to partner, successfully partnering with WashDOT and other partners, whether it's transit or port districts or other jurisdictions, to really kind of lead the charge and coming up with some long-term sustainable solutions and seeking funding and be successfully getting funding to do that, namely in Kingston. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think we all appreciate that and how well you do it.
Well, we appreciate that vote of confidence, commissioners. It is the basis and capability of the in-house staff that we have that make projects and transportation plans ready so we can compete for and secure those grant dollars when they are available from the Federal Highway Administration or through state programs. And, you know, the two examples that I can highlight this year are the Awalla Valley Road Overlay Preservation Project, as well as the Bethel Burley Culvert. When there was extra federal highway money available within the Puget Sound Regional Council, our team was agile enough in order to put the design and bid documents together on very short notice in order to be ready to execute those projects. And you signed the contracts for both those projects recently, and we're going to get after them real soon. So that's the demonstration of having capable and ready in-house staff. And it takes seed money in order to keep that staff operating and get concept designs put together, so we are capable of competing for those grants. So we appreciate your support and recognition of that staff.
Well, it makes us proud.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further from the group? Any questions, comments? It looks like we have reached the end of today's schedule. Early, even. So not only are you adept at finding funding for public works, you move us through a lot of information quickly and efficiently.
Thank
So
you,
we will be,
folks.
yes.
I'm going to move you back over now, and feel free to continue listening. And I think we'll just have a quick wrap-up discussion.
Okay.
Feel free to begin the quick wrap-up discussion.
We've been moved.
As I'm clicking.
Okay.
I'll just take this opportunity to call out the budget schedule here shows we've got an extended timeline for our deliberations. We're going to do sort of a preview of the general fund and where we're at on that 23rd of September, talk about revenue assumptions. And then I think what we'll do during that time also, if the board agrees, is maybe lay out sort of a schedule so that we can accommodate folks where we have questions, and maybe just target folks to come back and talk to us. Maybe it's, you know, what if it's about prioritization or observations that the budget office has after having seen a lot of you know, the submissions, and maybe we can layer each meeting with, you know, certain challenges we want to discuss with the department based on their submission or ideas, or and then we really need to make a decision on a balanced budget by the 28th of October. That's pushing it in terms of my comfortability, or we're going to have to generate a handful of reports and then notice that to the public for a December meeting. It's the first Monday in December that we need to at least hear on the budget, and then I think if we chose to delay, we can delay to the following Monday after that. But again, we're faced with a lot of difficult decisions. It is recommended practice to adopt a balanced budget in the general fund per the state auditor. I think that there's a lot of things that we maybe can do during these deliberations to talk about prioritization and maybe what we can do once we feel like we might be on an upward trajectory with our revenues, you know, sort of pre-planning ahead and give assurances to folks of how we might tackle coming back out of this.
Chris, when will you give us the next report for revenues, sales tax, whatever?
I should see sales tax again for July. Remember that they're always 2 months behind around the 20th of this month. And just for anybody that's also listening, the budget dashboard on our external website, we have really neat sales tax data on there, updates of what department spending is doing relative to their budget. It's a call out for 2020. We did reduce the budget by about $5 million already. And so we're monitoring the progress toward that cut that we've made in 2020 in the general fund. But I have already for you a report for what has been submitted for revenue sort of cumulatively. And we are at about a $2 million deficit relative to all the expenses submitted by each department in the general fund. There's probably a handful of conversations that need to happen about some of the special revenue funds too. Real estate excise tax, jail juvenile. I know roads and the crab diversions, probably a conversation that we need to have. And so probably come forward, like I said, on that 23rd and sort of outline the long-term agenda to talk about, make sure we touch on all those things.
So this is more for the citizen folks. Are you able to join us on the 23rd? Or would you like to give feedback to the group now? Or both?
This is Josh Inman. I'm able to be there on the 23rd.
You will? Yeah. Okay, good.
I can be there, Amber. This is Steve.
Okay, perfect.
Amber, this is Matt. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I tried to speak up a couple times during Public Works, being a Public Works employee, and for some reason my microphone defaulted to my other mic, and I was not smart enough to figure it out quick enough. So, so the staff of Public Works got off easy. They didn't have to hear from me. I had let Chris know at the beginning that at best I'll be a half an hour late to the meeting on the 23rd. At worst, I may not make it. So I apologize for that, but I'll do my best to be there for part of it.
Good, thank you.
I think I have conflicts on both the 23rd and the 28th. I could likely join for the later dates in October, though. If you guys are inviting us out for those as well.
Yeah, I think if I can assign homework, if you can have, you know, the things that cause you heartache or you want to know more information about, if you could have those ready for budget staff on the 23rd, then, you know, when we talk about those things, we'll make sure that for the 28th, the 12th, and 26th, we get those and coordinate with the departments to make sure that we can have them there to answer questions and feedback for what you have for us.
But for like Bentley, he just email them in to you. Perfect.
So Chris, so that we don't take too much energy on this and have it be unnecessary, what's the preliminary view of the health district not only not meeting the budget request, reduction request, but increasing it so significantly? I realize that COVID is a serious matter, but I'm sure every other department probably feels the same about their missions as well.
So they weren't increasing the county contribution. They were just looking at increasing their overall budget for next year, specifically for COVID. So that portion of it really is a conversation for the Board of Health in terms of, you know, does the board support the creation of a COVID program for the long term?
So that falls under the state support then?
The funding, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
But we would be looking for more specificity anyway.
But our decision point really is, do we, you know, we've been asking for cuts from our own departments. Can we support status quo and a flat payment?
If I recall from Keith's prior presentations and whatnot, a lot of the money that we give to them annually goes sort of to a discretionary, lack of a better term, undesignated, where they float across various programs. And so my guess is he's going to use some of that money to, along with the state and federal dollars, to start up this program.
Understood. Thanks.
Somebody had something to say?
It's a good question, and I think as Rob pointed out, the board of health will have to take a look at this. Number one, and number two, I think we need a meeting with the Board of Commissioners and staff just to talk about that more. I was quite pleased to hear a status quo budget after everything they've been through, but I get this is they're just one department, and with all the problems that we are experiencing, the health problems, COVID problems, but I think it's a board decision or board discussion further.
And you know, I wish I would have considered this more, asked it more, but I would love to have known what the departments have seen in the way of improved efficiency or loss of efficiency related to remote work. It got touched on a little bit, but in Public Works, it's unique because there's staff so spread out and so diverse that here at the treatment facility, we've been pretty much full staff since the ending of the initial COVID concern back in March. And whereas people out of the annex or the Public Works building are working remotely, and I'd be curious what the efficiencies of that have led to.
For all departments or Public Works?
Well, Public Works specifically, because I'm Public Works, and I know there's a lot that are remote working, but I think it'd be interesting because that could be a future, and that could be lack of business space being paid for and used and planned for where employees report to work and how much commute they have to do. So it'd be a curious topic.
I think we'll hear much in the future from Nancy from HR regarding efficiencies, but my gut visceral reaction is, I'm not talking about Public Works or the Sheriff's Office, but I've seen efficiencies throughout our organization.
Throughout ours and across the other jurisdictions that we've been talking with about it.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I was just going to say, I know that Nancy and Human Resources have been working on this issue quite a bit and would probably be the best folks to talk to get some idea about questions like this.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Right. I think it's also kind of what Administrator Goon actually referred to this morning during the Board of County Commissioners budget talking, is sort of, pausing on some ways on the courthouse project or other things. It's like this has kind of been really caused a reset. And so that every business, regardless of what you do, unless you are a restaurant and you need people coming in physically to do that. But if you are an office-based type of business, that paradigm may be shifting tremendously as to what those space needs are in the future. So it'll change our capital program for buildings, definitely, I think, substantially.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yep. We're seeing it in some of the big cities, for sure. Anything else for today?
Lastly, I'd just like to do a quick plug for Amy and David. They went through a lot of really difficult conversations with all these departments, and rightfully so. People are frustrated. This is a difficult time, and I just want to give big kudos to them. I talk a lot on this, but I know that they did most of the work behind the scenes, and I can just read the form and understand what the form says. But we will leverage them big time in the deliberation process because they know the background here.
Indeed. Thank everybody for it.
Yeah. And some for you too, Chris.
Yeah, definitely for Chris too, and all of you. But was that Jackie Carney that used to work in? Is that the same Jackie Carney?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't realize she had moved over from the auditor.
Yep, to Public Works, just started on Monday.
And from the budget office, Amber's got good people.
I got original credit for her.
Well, and this
Amber,
is Josh.
Amber, hold on to your people now, will you?
Hey, this is Josh. I mean, I'll just say again, I'm impressed by your guys' process. From an outside perspective and a citizen, it gives a lot of confidence in what you all do. I think in a partisan world, this process doesn't feel very partisan, and it shouldn't
be.
And I commend you guys for the way in which you've done your work, the way in which you prepare it, and the clarity of which I think people came in knowing what to expect. So good job to you guys in the leadership lane of that. I think it's not an easy time to be a leader, and I'm impressed. I was impressed last year, impressed again this year. So I appreciate all the hard work you guys do. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you come back again next year?
Hey, you're a great asset, Josh.
It does help to get a year-over-year perspective. I will say that.
Yeah.
I'll bet.
Well, they're completely different years, aren't they, Josh?
Oh my word. Yeah, very, very different. So thank you.
Thank you guys, sir and gals.
Yeah, we're really grateful for you.
If you don't mind, go ahead.
Sorry?
Oh, I was just going to say, I got to give a quick plug to one of our new division managers. I used to work at a private laboratory up in Paulsbo 20 years ago. And when I departed, it was Chris Piercy that took the position in that same lab and worked there for a short time. So it's a small world.
Yeah. Funny. Amber, did you have something?
I was just going to put out there that if there's anything anyone wants or needs between now and the 23rd, just email us and we will gladly provide whatever data or answer questions that you may have. And then on the 23rd, we'll get into a much deeper dive of some of the details of the things you've heard, and we'll put up that decision model that we're used to seeing where you turn things on and off, yes and no, and walk through the specifics at that point. But in the meantime, if there's anything that we can do for you, citizens, board, whoever, then let us know.
Great.
Thank
And
you.
we'll be posting the recorded sessions, Zoom sessions on our YouTube channel, I believe. So we'll let you guys know when that's available. We've gotten quite a few requests to have those recordings posted for people to see. So once we get that sorted out, we'll let everybody know.
Good.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you all. It's been a couple of days, and now we can maybe just sit back and breathe a sigh of relief for a little while.
Well, now the hard work begins.
Well, let's take a little breather first, and then we'll do the hard work. So thank you again, and have a great evening.
Okay, we'll see everyone soon.
Have a good evening.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.